and in a way will exist because we don't completely embrace the universalist argument that one shoe size fits all. We want to understand that adaptation happens within context. Then there's an ecological approach to all this. We want to increase congruence between the experience of the participants, their worldview, who they are, and the intervention. Sometimes we talk about communities as being more collectivistic, or the collective element. And then if an intervention is only based on the individual and is very individualistic, maybe at the core of the intervention there's a mismatch between ways of helping or receiving help. If the whole intervention is about me, I, and people in their daily conversation, when we talk to the people we work with, they only say we, maybe there is something there. I still have a difficult time, even maybe some of you share that, when we do annual performance reviews or we go out for tenure, I had to learn culturally how to sell myself. How to say I'm the greatest person, I have done all this stuff. I have published all these articles. I have gotten all these awards. I. I grew up in a culture that we were not encouraged to blow our own horn. I remember when I had my first review, I was upset with the review committee because they gave me a mediocre review, and I had to work very hard. I said, come on, you guys, what's going on here? They said, well, you didn't blow your own horn. We're going to do it for you. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And think about our own clients. When we want them to be assertive, we want them to move on, we want them to, take the next step, and we're asking them to do it alone when it's not what comes natural. It's not that they don't want to take the next step, but some people don't make steps alone, don't take those steps alone, and that can be a good thing. And it's not codependency, it's interdependence. And then all those things need to be considered in these interventions, because when we assess success, we may be using the wrong tools to assess the efficacy, or in this case, effectiveness of the intervention, that may not match what the original efficacy trial found, but maybe the community is so different that even the tools of assessment need to change. Because maybe it is being effective, and the person is making progress, but the way we're measuring that progress is through the wrong lens. Yes? Maybe it's an individualistic lens when the progress is made in a more collectivistic way. Then the measures need to change and match the community better. And sometimes I'm more concerned about the measures of success than the actual intervention. And we have to be careful distinguishing the two. Then some people will say that a lot of the evidence-based interventions we have, or treatments in this case, have been developed and tested with white, middle-class, European American, whatever adjectives we want to use, that may not represent a lot of communities in our nation. Then it's difficult then to generalize those findings. I think it's true, that continues to be, even in the pharmaceutical world and the medical establishment. We know that after all these years, we have a long way to go. I hope that in social work, we are a little bit more aware than other fields, and we are more careful about our samples and how representative the samples are in our studies, and how well we can generalize the findings. I think still cultural adaptation is needed because of what we were saying about within group differences. Like somebody tells me, oh, I have now, I finished my randomized clinical trial and I'm very confident that my Latino intervention works. I said, well, what Latinos? You know, tell me more. You know, Latino is an umbrella term that has so many people under it. I always like to give the example of, I went to school in my graduate work was in Cleveland. As people like to say, I did time in Cleveland. But I love Cleveland. I really enjoy Cleveland. When people ask me, where are you from? I say, I'm from Cleveland. I'm a Baca. And people look at me, okay. It's an interesting Ohio accent. Then we were in this group, and it was a community organizing effort for the Latino community. And there we have people from many different national origins. And in the same group, you found people from Puerto Rico who were born, raised, and came to Cleveland as adults. You have people of Mexican ancestry who came to the States as adults. You have Puerto Rican kids, Puerto Rican American kids who were born in Cleveland. You had this guy who was from Argentina who was of German ancestry and was in the group. And then all these very different people are supposed to all be the same. They're all supposed to be Latinos and understand each other like that and make this happen. You know, organize themselves. And if they didn't, people said, you see, there again, fighting among themselves. And I said, that's very oppressive to such Japan. You know, Latinos are a coalition of people that need to develop some common agenda before they can make progress. Then when we say we have a Latino intervention, well, you have to tell me more than that. Social class, you know, is very important. National origin, generational status, you name it. Religion, you have so many factors. Gender, sexual orientation, you have so many other factors that intersectionality plays a key role here in identifying that. Then we understand that we need to develop sometimes new interventions because some of those within group differences are so important that they need to be addressed. And some of those within group differences are so crucial that in our case, we have found that with all the anti-immigration sentiment and the legislation in Arizona, as you probably all know, if a person is documented or undocumented, plays a key role. And that makes a big difference. But at the same time, what we have found in one of our studies that was a household study, and we interviewed people in the same neighborhood, and was a mixed neighborhood with people who are documented, people who are undocumented. The fear of the repression and all the environment that was created, the climate, made the mental health issues very similar across both communities. Because if somebody was documented, he or she was fearful for the neighbor. Then the effects were at a community level. It was beyond just, you know, status in terms of paper, you know, what if you were or not documented. Then there is a need to identify that, not to use very narrow set of criteria that may exclude people from an intervention that they may benefit from. Then it's that fine line between who is part of that group and who is not part of the group. Then I always suggest that our interventions cannot be too narrow, because also it's more difficult to get them funded. Yes, I think there is an issue, and it's not practical. We don't have the resources society to have so many very, very specific interventions. We have to realize that there are elements that are not shared, but let's concentrate on what is shared. And that's what maybe we need to concentrate on. We can get more out of our investment, because always politicians and other people who give us money, they want the most return from their investment. Then that's the reason why it's important to get into this fine line between how specific and how general. Then I think we need to develop some criteria about when to adapt them. If the engagement is low and is below what is expected, that's a good time to stop for a minute and have to collect more evidence. Maybe there is something that is not happening here. I don't feel connected to the intervention. That would be a good sign. Or the outcomes are not being achieved. One thing that's important here is, again, when there is low adherence, when there is high dropout rate, when all those things are happening, not to blame the client again. Oh, they are not interested. They are not interested. Let's look at what we are providing them. Then, what am I doing here? Let's talk about the tools we're using and always keep the client a little bit higher than that. They want to get better. They want to be more engaged. That's the way I always think. What am I doing, or what am I using that is not letting me, or not helping them to achieve their goals? Then there are culture-specific risks and protective factors that maybe were not part of the original intervention. And I think both are important. If the whole idea of the example about being documented or undocumented was never considered in the intervention originally, because probably it was not done with a community similar to the one I work with, then people will go to meet next to the police station, yes, or in the courthouse, because that's where this program is. Now, nobody's coming to my intervention. Why? They don't want to participate. Well, maybe it's not, if Joe Arpaio, his office is next to the community center where we are meeting. Joe Arpaio is the sheriff in our county. Probably I will not go there. Or if you're asking me to drive at night, or, all these things need to be considered. But then sometimes it's changing what is around the intervention, not the core elements of the intervention. That is appropriate to take place in courthouses or in police stations. But the intervention is a good one. Then we need to examine that. One protective factor that we have found is in a parenting intervention we're doing now during an effectiveness trial with that. Our parenting intervention was about parents, father, mother, usually mothers are the ones who come. But we understand now that we have to be more flexible. And not just much a child with a mother. It can be an aunt, it can be a neighbor. Then the whole idea of extended family in its most beautiful, manifestation needs to be incorporated into the intervention. And how to incorporate that in the protocols, then it's not that limited. Then we have made some progress, we have much to do. There are some persistent issues. Do we need to incorporate everything that was in the original randomized control trial? I think we will incorporate as much as we can, but also we need to do the surface adaptation first, meaning if my colleague Felipe Castro, who is now in the UT system, he left Arizona 3 years ago, always talks about that. There is a surface level of adaptation that can be language, and language is not surface, but surface in this regard, this adaptation. If most of my participants speak only Diné, meaning Navajo language, if I only provide intervention in English or Spanish, probably I would not be able to reach the Diné people or the Diné-speaking people. Then I need to have something to deal with that. That's surface because I'm not changing the intervention. I'm only changing the language in which the intervention is being delivered. But the collectivistic, individualistic issue we were talking about earlier, that's more like deep level. It's not just surface. Then that's the part that we need to start to differentiate the levels of adaptation. Usually when we do more surface adaptation, for example, we change the examples. It's the same idea that we want to convey with example, but instead of saying we're going to the country club this weekend, yes, we're going to the mercado this weekend. Yeah, and then we talk about that. But it's still a family activity that we do together. Then we achieve the same goal with example, but we change the context, the place, all those things. Then that would be more surface. But if we talk about who is in the family and what family looks like, what my family looks like, and we only talk about father, mother, and child, that would be one type. But if we talk about those other relationships and important other relationships, maybe that's more at a deeper level. Then, how do we know when culture has been properly integrated? I will say that because we do this work with community will tell us if something is offensive for them, if they don't recognize themselves in that change that was made, because they're supposed to give us the elements of the change, the ingredients of that change. Then they will be able to keep us honest in our change. I think we know that we are learning about how to do this, and there are some cognitive issues that we are getting much better at. The affective issues are a little more sophisticated, and I think we have more to go, a longer way to go. And I think there's the whole issue of value conflict. What for me is right or is wrong. Often we can find that a connection to culture because it's going to worldview. Then I think that's when we need much more involvement from community in helping us identify those core values that communities share and cherish. There are models for this, and in terms of elements that we can change. And these are some of the examples that you can see here. The Castro reference that I give here is a good one to follow, the last one, in terms of cognitive, affective changes, the two levels I was describing earlier.